Welcome. This is Jeff Johnston, host of the Living Undeterred podcast, and I have my good friend Brandon Ernest Clark on the podcast this morning. Welcome, Brandon. How you doing, man?
Thank you, Jeff. I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on.
You and I met towards the tail end of our Living Undeterred U.S. tour. I think it was. I know it was really hot in Salt Lake City, right? That's where we met.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, and we did a stop out there, and the primary purpose of the stop, we partnered with some people that had suicide awareness and mental health awareness with the veterans of our community. Um, that was kind of the main, but then we had other people show up as well. I've met you on LinkedIn, like it seems like I do everybody these days. One of the benefits of COVID was it kind of forced us on the platforms like LinkedIn, where I met some amazing people. And you made the stop out. You and I have gone back and forth on LinkedIn, kind of small talked, and I was, admire your passion, your courage, your will to share your story. Which I think today that's what we want to do. We want to give you an opportunity here to talk about your mental health advocacy, some of your personal stories that you have been given an opportunity to become better from and not bitter at, as I talk about a lot. Um, where do you want to start? I mean, you have a very interesting story. I follow a lot of your posts on LinkedIn, and you've got some things that you're working on for therapy wise, for solutions for treatment. But then your story has some interesting genesis as well, um, and some family stories as well. I've seen you post about too that you were candid about.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. So it goes back to family history. I mean, the the things that I wasn't aware of were kind of the bullets that kind of came back to come after me. And
Mm-hmm.
the more that I became aware of what my family had been through, then I was able to just have clarity as to what I was experiencing, what I was going through as far as genetically going, that mental illness runs in my family,
Mm-hmm.
and wanting to desiring healing for myself and my family. And kind of the only way to go through it was to go through the valley of shadow of death, to go through the adversity in a way that was not fun, but was necessary. And um, just that family history component was critical.
So did you have your family maybe not share everything as you were growing up, and then at some point you started realizing you were having some mental health challenges, and that's when you found out that, hey, my family did as well? Or did you know about these things for the most part?
Yeah, I sort of knew about it, but the genetics piece of that it could happen to me too was kind of uh, wasn't considered by, especially by my parents, because my grandpa on my mom's side, he was institutionalized starting in the 80s for alcoholism and bipolar,
Okay.
and he he struggled with that, and it was kind of just looked at that that was his struggle. We're different. We don't have alcohol problems, so we're going to be okay.
I
And
gotcha. So they thought the root of everything was alcohol related.
correct. Yeah.
Hmm. So what age did you start to have these challenges?
So it really started when I was 4. My dad accidentally ran me over, and
Mm.
that event shaped my childhood, shaped my teenage years and my young adult years. I didn't realize the significance of traumatic brain injury and how impactful that can be. And
4 years old. Wow. And you have to think of how that impacted your dad as well.
totally, yeah, he's
I
kind
can't
of
even
the
imagine. I mean, I can't even imagine even though there was, obviously it was an accident, but just still the guilt that he must have carried,
the
the what
main
if games that you play in situations like that.
the main thing for him was, you hear stories about people were prompted that God says, look out, look behind you, um, get that. that inspirational story of,
Hmm.
an accident prevented. But for him, he didn't get any such prompting when he,
Did that question his faith? What faith was he prior to this, and did it question it?
yeah. So out in Utah, there's uh, Latter-day Saints are the majority of the faith out here,
Hmm.
and so he's very devout, very faithful, and it didn't question his faith to the point to where he gave up, but there were years where he was just kind of mad at God a little bit, and
Hmm.
that was his struggle to reconcile, with his faith, and I think like we came together, like it grew our family closer. Um, but for me personally, the mental health side of it really was challenging. And I struggled with
Hmm.
anger management. And it's pretty well noted that traumatic brain injury is tied to anger management, and then that they're tied and linked.
So maybe help me understand, like on a scale to 1 to 10, how severe was this?
Yeah, so the paramedics and the emergency service, they were very like concerned. For example, about 2 weeks after, one of the paramedics called my dad to say, like, check in on me because a lot of the times the statistics that they were told was like 1 in 1,000 chance that I would have lived.
Hmm.
Uh, they were pretty. It was severe. Like my skull was fractured. The quarter size of my skull was punctured and was just resting on the membrane of my brain. And the neurosurgeon that went in and to evaluate the to evaluate it, he said like they had to elevate my skull and sew it back together,
Hmm.
essentially.
And this affected you or impacted you all the way up to this moment, literally.
Yeah, certainly. And I I remember as a child just questioning why didn't I just die? I was just
Hmm.
struggling with the pain of, just life is hard, and not knowing the the impact of the accident, but it was there. Like I questioned whether I should still be living, and it
So
elevated to the, yeah, go ahead.
when you got into high school, did you start experimenting with drugs and alcohol and painkillers and things to try to numb the pain, or did you just figure out some ways to cope with what you were going through?
Yeah, in my childhood and teenage years, sports were definitely a key
Yeah,
outlet for me, and
right.
I would say those helped, as well as my my mom's attitude of how alcohol had affected her life. She was pretty strong in her willpower to say no to that, and she passed
Okay.
on that willpower to me as well.
So she was an alcoholic and she gave up alcohol.
No, she just saw the impact that it had on her dad, and
Oh, I
so
gotcha.
she never
Gotcha.
experimented, but she said, "No, that's not going to happen." In
Did you ever
my,
struggle with substance abuse and alcohol yourself?
I didn't. Mm-mm.
Okay. Well, that's good because that's one less thing you have to cross off the box. It's one thing you have to, one less thing you have to, or as they say, one less beast you have to slay. When you're going through something traumatic, the more things that you have to fight against, obviously the tougher that it gets. And that's the co occurring issues with mental illness that you and I have talked about before, is that sometimes we spend a lot of time on one thing, like let's quit your drinking, or let's fix your attitude, let's say, or fix your mindset. And then we lose focus if there's some other issues. So you talk about bipolar. So are you clinically bipolar then, diagnosed?
Yeah, so like the family history piece is there, so
Okay.
for sure. I I go and see a doctor under the framework that I have bipolar, and it's I had two manic episodes that were telltale to where, I was in psychosis. I was not myself. I was out there pursuing pretty lofty goals that were beyond me at the time. For
Right.
example, uh, attempting to start a worldwide movement through a YouTube channel, and I was not sleeping for two weeks, and my energy was just all over the place. And
Yeah.
and I have a medical background, um, and so the scientific method of rule out,
Mm.
is this what I have? Rule out,
Hmm.
no, no, because I certainly had post-traumatic stress
Right.
from my childhood,
Right.
and for some time I was you know looking at the framework, getting help for that, or trying to get help for that, going to therapy, getting meeting with doctors, and things got worse as I was just trying to get help for post-traumatic stress, and
Why'd they
it
get
led.
worse, you think?
So I in 2019 I worked a graveyard shift, and I was working in a psychiatric setting,
Oh, wow.
and I was being exposed to all the mental illnesses. I was working at the state hospital in Utah, and
Okay.
there they have beds for every county to bring people in, and so I was working with people with bipolar, people with schizophrenia, geriatric, pediatric, and for 4 months I was working a graveyard shift on Wednesday nights while trying to study for the MCAT course for medical school.
Okay.
And the stress I was undergoing of trying to pursue medical school, as well as you know having the trauma of my childhood, I hadn't reconciled a lot of that trauma.
Hmm.
And so as well, that facility was the same place where my grandpa was
Oh, wow.
admitted in the 80s. So going
Maybe
there,
triggered some things, right?
it triggered some things, knowing that my grandpa's condition, that he was there. And man, something unwound for me while I was working those graveyard shifts, getting that sleep deprivation, not getting the adequate rest that we need. Um, and it unwound me to the point where I started having symptoms of mania. I didn't know what they were, but I was
Hmm.
talking my wife's ear off for 2 hours. Couldn't shut off my mouth. Like, I was just talkative, talkative, talkative. And I was
Hmm.
getting all these ideas. I'd never had significant, flow of ideas that was overwhelming to the point where I couldn't sleep. Like, I was just set on a new path that or a new direction in life
Now,
of.
were you medicated during this time? Was some of this stuff maybe from medication?
So I wasn't medicated. What was insightful was I learned after the fact, about a year after that first incident, that there are three triggers for mania in bipolar, and they are drugs, alcohol, and working graveyard shifts. And
Really?
so, exactly, yeah. And it
I
all
would
comes
never.
back.
The first two I think would be pretty obvious, but working graveyard shifts?
Is a
That
trigger for
specific,
mania.
huh?
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. And it all comes back to
Wow.
sleep, because I mean, our Jordan Peterson, uh, he
Oh,
says
yeah.
that for bipolar, it's a mood disorder that's a circadian rhythm disorder. So our circadian rhythm is determined by the sun, and our pattern to go to bed when the sun goes down and to wake
Mm,
up when the sun comes up. And so working a graveyard shift goes all against that natural circadian rhythm. And
interesting.
so for me,
Sometimes it's the
yeah,
simplest things. You go back to Occam's razor where it's sometimes just the simplest things are the best solutions. And you think of something like all the complexities we have in mental health. And then you
mhm,
look at something just sleep. I mean, sleep has been the remedy for so many problems and challenges for so many years, but we tend to not give it much credence with mental health. It's just something really not talked about. Although I think it's more talked about today than in the past. And I've noticed myself personally, the last couple of years, I'm getting up to an hour more sleep than I did previous this, and I'm 56. So I normally ran on anywhere from, 6 to 7 hours of sleep a night. Now I'm pushing 8, which is great, but I almost feel like sometimes I'm wasting too much time sleeping. I'm like you, I'm like, God, I slept till 7:50 today. What the heck? I could have been working on something for 2 hours. You know, it's like I wake up feeling guilty sometimes. Although when I wake up like at 6 and I'm tired, I don't feel guilty going back to bed. So
I think I read somewhere that
sleep is underrated.
Albert Einstein, he slept for 10 hours. That was his routine.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just it's whatever works for you, and I think that's where when you and I met, I talk a lot about my story when at my presentations and about my coping mechanisms, meditation and exercise. I'm not a compulsive exerciser, but I'm focused, and I have this thing in my head that if I don't do 2 hours a day, I'll die. That's my mindset. Maybe that is compulsive. I don't know. But, I think for you, whatever works. If it's trying to get better sleep or more sleep, or I know you've talked a few about, I want to talk about the TMS a little bit. Um, you've made some posts on your site, you wearing the helmet, I guess, lack of a
Mhm.
better word, but I'd love to kind of segue into maybe some of the things you do for your coping mechanisms. So people listening and watching this that are going through something similar can relate to, you and I both, even though we're both mental health advocates, our stories are fairly different, but they're very similar as well.
Mhm.
If you peel back everything, they are very similar.
Yeah, I can go into kind of the things I've tried and the,
Yeah, I
the,
think that'd be great
the
for people listening to this. Like, what age did you start trying things, and maybe some of the things that have worked and some of the things that haven't worked for you?
man, like one of the areas that I've struggled with. So the post-traumatic stress, there's there are different kinds of therapies you can try. So, one of the very first that I got into was um, EMDR. Um, that's that's a bilateral stimulation. What that means is it activates both hemispheres of our brain
Okay.
on like all it alternates the stimulation of each hemisphere. Kind of like a metronome when you're playing a,
Right.
a musical instrument.
Right.
It it metronomes it in a way that it's consistent. Because when we're in a sympathetic nervous system response, um, we are in fight or flight, and our emotional brain is just nonstop, go, 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 and it's just cycling really fast, really rapidly. And EMDR is able to put the metronome effect on to almost like hypnotize that traumatic response.
So
And
EMDR is
I,
that
I
is
it's
go
called
ahead.
eye movement desensitization uh,
Okay.
rehabilitation or something like that.
And that was one of the early methods that you used to try to get yourself in a better place.
Yeah, definitely. So 2020 was I did it for a good month, and I was able to I had somebody close to me die in 2016, a mentor that helped me want to go to medical school. He said, "Brandon, you make a great doctor. Um, have you thought about going to medical school?" And he kind of got that medical field um, interest in me that I hadn't had previous. And 3 months after that conversation, I find out that he died of a heart attack. And
Mm.
that was really, really hard. And I didn't know how to grieve, um, the death of someone. The way I coped was like, it's like I became just very driven to pursue the goal of medical school. And
Yeah.
to the extent that I was, come hell or high water, I'm going to bring honor to this mentor's name. And it was a kind of energy that wasn't sustainable and wasn't for the right reasons. I needed to go to
Right.
medical school for me, not for someone else. And
I can
20,
relate so much to that. I can relate to so much of that. Even my phrase at Living Undeterred, purpose becomes passion when it gets personal. I'm often reminded by the experts that, passion has a tank that can run out, and if you're just fueled by passion, you may not get anything done. You may not really change the world. You've got to have an intentional purpose and focus. You know, I like to say I could run out. I could run out of a lot of things, money, even time, but I can't run out of passion. And I have to be careful because I think you could potentially run out of passion by getting burned out.
yep. And that's exactly what happened to me. Because then because I was on medical school interview in Texas, I was asked, if you were a high school principal, how would you address mental health for your students? And so this mental health kind of piece narrative came into my framework, because I didn't get into that medical school, but that question kind of was running through my mind of mental health. And that's actually what prompted me to go and work at the state hospital in 2019. And like I was like, okay, I feel like I need to learn about mental health. It seems relevant because burnout is talked about in the medical field. And
Hmm.
I'm like, I honestly feel like my internal self was saying, I might burn out. So I'd like to learn about mental health so I don't get burned out. And working that graveyard shift was what did me in further that
Yeah.
actually led to my burn. Um, and so, man, as far as what helped and what I ended up trying, so EMDR was kind of the first help that I pursued after my burnout. Um, and then, I just dived into kind of mindfulness techniques,
Yeah.
breathing techniques,
Yeah. Me too.
meditation,
Yep.
meditation.
So TMS, is that a version of EMDR?
So TMS is so EMDR doesn't really stimulate your brain. Um,
Okay.
it's a vibration, like you have it held in your hands.
Okay.
So your left hand vibrates while there's light. Then they can have lights that also direct your eye movement.
Okay.
And so there's stimulation, there's visual stimulation, and then there's physical stimulation. And so the visual and physical stimulation together are what metronome and hypnotize your.
And this has been helpful for you.
Yeah, so it's really to help reduce the fight or flight. If you notice
The
inside yourself,
anxiety?
it could be anxiety.
Okay.
Fight or flight is kind of, there's an emotional response, there's, know, as well as anxiety response. Yeah, the
Hmm.
racing heart, a racing heart.
I mean, it's you're looking at evolution. I mean, we've had fight or flight since we lived in caves, and you know, that's just part of being a human being. So it's not trying to eliminate that emotive state. It's more trying to manage it, correct?
Correct. Hmm.
Yeah, because you can't eliminate out anxiety. This is where I talk to people all the time. I'm just a dad from Iowa. I have no medical background in this stuff. I'm kind of common sense and very pragmatic. I'm like, we were gifted these evolutionary tools to make us realize there's a lion behind the bush, or somebody coming up with a club to kill me and take my mate at the time. So we've got these things innate to us that I think it's you know unfortunate that we want to try to get rid of some of these things. Like, I think anxiety managed correctly can be a very good tool. Now, I used to tell my sons when they were playing sports, I said, you know, getting getting nervous and getting anxious are two different things. Nervous means you're afraid. You're afraid of failure. You're afraid of saying the wrong thing. Like you're nervous about going on to public speaking. That's a negative connotation. But anxious isn't. I think getting anxious can actually stimulate everything in your body to give you a little bit more juice, get you jacked up for the big event. But anxiety, that fear of I think anxiety, again, I think I'm nitpicking a little bit here, or maybe looking at ways we can help reframe these, help people deal with these things. I think in its right terms, having anxiety can be beneficial. But what we don't want to do is be sitting up all night worrying about something we have to do the next day to the point where we're not sleeping. And then that anxiety becomes a problem, right?
Hmm. Yeah, that's certainly what happened to me. I didn't know how to manage the anxiety, and it got to a point where I I knew by like 10 p.m. like my anxiety is so bad that I might not get to bed till 2 a.m. Like I'm gonna have a
Mm-hmm.
4 hour battle with anxiety, and I don't know how to manage. Yeah,
So, as a mental health advocate, do you spend most of your time? I mean, you don't have any like patients. You're not a physician or a clinical individual, right? Do you have clients and patients?
yeah. So for now, my mission statement says um, my purpose is to empower and uplift myself, my family, and my community incrementally with hope, support, and healing through
Okay,
entrepreneurship, leadership, music, speaking, writing. And so for now, I'm primarily focused on myself and my family, and I'm
right.
inching towards my community. I don't want to. That was one of my issues early on. Was I was extending myself a bit too far too soon.
Mm-hmm.
So for now, I'm really focused on myself and family, and I'm gonna get there to turn my purpose to helping my community and helping others beyond the scope of my local community, if you will.
That's very wise. I don't know your age, but you're younger than me. But I think it's important that self care as an advocate is emphasized because I know, and so do you, people in this business of mental health advocacy that themselves are a train wreck
Yeah.
where they are running from first thing in the morning, late at night, eating poorly, maybe alcohol, taking meds. All day long, they deal with other people's problems. It's like one person you're on the phone with for an hour, all you hear is bad, negative stuff. And then you go to the next person, same thing. And it's like all day long, putting out fires, And then you get home and it's very difficult to get away from that, to separate yourself from that. So mental health advocates, a lot of them get really pulled into the abyss. And I've seen really good, well, I know of mental health advocates that have done the ultimate, taken their own lives as well-known advocates for mental health. And that's in and of itself very scary that someone who's so passionate to help others actually gets lost themselves in this quest or this desire to be somebody for everybody, you know, at our expense. And I run into that too. And last Christmas is where I had my biggest brush with, you know, everything I've ever been at came to a head last Christmas. So I'm coming up on a 1 year anniversary when I had my first role. What I would consider my first brush with suicidal ideation myself, which I don't talk about a lot. But I think it's important I do because people look at living undeterred as bulletproof, and I'm not. I'm no less human than Brandon Ernest Clark. Um, but if I can be such a strong advocate, and then at the same time have moments where I was in the abyss, as I like to call it, then pretty much anyone can, and that's why I think self care, and that's why I applaud what you're doing, Brandon. Before you're going out and saving the world, you've got to save yourself first, or you're not going to be much good to anybody else, right?
Hmm. Yeah, Brandon Ernest. So I put Ernest on my LinkedIn, Brandon Ernest Clark, because that's my grandpa's name. He was born in 1923, And around that same time, my great grandma, so my grandpa's mother, she was notoriously, she loved celebrities and the famous people of that time. And one of the World War One heroes that wasn't involved in the war, but was an explorer by the name of Ernest Shackleton.
Oh
Um,
yeah,
it's
I know
it's
his
spec
story quite well.
Yeah, so Ernest Shackleton, I'm pretty sure my grandpa was named after him. So part
Oh
of my
wow.
so my middle name comes from my grandpa, who comes likely from Ernest Shackleton. So I really like to internalize that story of going to
Yeah.
Antarctica and exploring. This is past March, the ship that got stuck in the ice
The
folds,
endurance, right?
the Endurance, they
Yep.
found it. And
Yep.
so just basically summed up, Ernest Shackleton was stranded in Antarctica and
Yeah.
was able to get his crew of 27 men
He actually went
back
back
back to
for him,
safety.
right?
Yeah, he went back for him. So
Because
they
first
had
the
to,
first trip he went back and then he came back and got him.
yeah. Mhm. So they left like 24 at, a checkpoint basically, and then they had to go through treacherous waters to get to another island where they could get a bigger ship. And
Hmm.
for this is a 2-year stranded trip or something like that. But Shackleton's leadership in saying no man is left behind, like
Hmm.
he made and kept his promises to to get everyone back to safety.
It's funny because the ad he ran in the paper preceding his trip to recruit men to go is used now kind of as they've I don't know if you've seen the ad, but it's like I don't know, maybe when Molly's editing this, she could put the actual ad up because you could Google the ad on the internet and find it. But it's a little thing they had in the paper. That basically is like, you know, good pay, you probably won't live, trip of a lifetime. But he was very, very clear on
It's not for
this
the
is
faint of
a
heart.
exactly. And you know what? He had almost a line of people that were interested in going. It was like, I don't know if sold out's the right word, but it filled up quickly. Um, but today, if you ran that ad, you wouldn't get anybody to show up because it seems like we just have less courageous people. We have more people on the planet, but less courageous people. We're a society afraid to take risks, and couple that with all the other issues. And this is where I was going to kind of segue from Ernest Shackleton to another question I have for you. Where have we dropped the ball as a society? Why do we have so many just unhappy, miserable, negative, angry, bitter individuals in a time when we should be abundant with knowledge and wisdom and experiences and awe and gratitude, and we should really love life what we have, but we don't. We have more things we've ever had, ever in the history of not just humankind but the history of America. um but we're not doing well.
Mhm.
What's the problem in your opinion?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. I would say there is a lot of wisdom and truth in the philosophy of Stoicism, and
I love stoicism, man. That's my big
like
thing.
and one of the key mainstays of Stoicism is that there's opposition in all things, and you have to face that opposition with courage in order to get through it. And you can't run away from your problems, basically. Like you have to, not in the sense that you just do it without emotion. I don't think stoicism, like, because people say the phrase like, oh, they're just stoic. They don't show emotion. I
Right.
think that does a big disservice to the philosophies that we are incredibly emotional beings, and we can suffer and cry through our suffering. And it's really, how do we use our adversity to transform ourselves? um, that's that in my opinion, that's the basis of stoicism, is using what happens to you as a means to change and grow.
It's like I said at the end of the my presentations, do things happen to you or do things happen for you? And that's stoicism in its essence. You know, the ability to look at things from a different lens, right? Because we have a tendency to just look at things from our perspective. And stoicism allows you to almost see things from, you know, a different self, you know, a different perspective. And reframing is a core ability of the successful Stoics back in the day. And we don't do that. You know, I mean, somebody cuts us off and we yell at them, or it just, we're so reactionary. We don't have any control of our emotions anymore. And I think, and maybe you'll agree, but some of it has to do with just our inability to pause and reflect and observe, you know, be aware of what's going on around us instead of being so in tune with having to react to everything. Sometimes just let it go, you know, don't react. Observing and not identifying with things is a real big part of stoicism. And in combination with meditation, it's been life saving for me. I literally don't know if I would still be here today if I didn't have the ability to reframe and to not identify with my thoughts. And I got that from meditation, which I never done until my son died. I, dude, I have attention deficit. I may seem chill right now talking to you, but I work really hard at trying to slow my talking down and to slow my even my body movements because I have full blown attention deficit, but I don't take any meds. So it's been intentional work. And you probably have attention deficit too, Brandon. You were talking about your hyper focused and you couldn't shut your brain off. I mean, dude, that's attention deficit. You notice I don't use the word disorder.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important that, especially with kids, we don't throw these words around haphazardly. And you say attention deficit disorder to a child, then they're going to really believe it's a disorder. If you just say attention deficit and stop, they won't. And we don't do that. Again, that's the adults dropping the ball with our kids. And I think the stoicism thing is really big. I think you're onto something. And you see a resurgence with Ryan Holiday, um, even James Clear, you know, a lot of the guys out there. Rich Roll on his podcast, he's talked about this. You kind of see a new renaissance, I guess, of stoicism. So I'm happy you brought that up because it's kind of a core part of my day to day existence is my ability to. I mean, during the day, sometimes in the middle of a busy moment, I'll just relish it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I
Like
same same.
my phone's ringing, the doorbell's going. I got my granddaughter here, she's running around the house, and my son's here with his girlfriend. We got a football game on. Sometimes I will just stop and just say, at some point in my life, none of this is going to be here. This is in the moment. And all the stress goes away, all the anxiety goes away. I think of myself living in a house with nobody around me, being an old person with nobody here, and it's just me. And that day's coming. And we're all going to be that old version of us today. So anyway, I'm happy you brought that up because stoicism's been a really big aspect of my life, and seems like it's an important part of yours as well.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, thanks.
So what's next for you? Projects? Do you have a book? Do you have podcasts? I mean, what what things of advocacy are you interested in?
Yeah, so being a guest on podcasts just to serve other communities, that's really big for me. Is I want to partially get my name out there, and
Right.
you know, being a guest on podcasts is a good way to um, continue that process of getting outside my comfort zone, being vulnerable. Uh,
That's
is
huge. That's so big,
that
man.
that it
So
helps
big.
me. It helps me, even though it's scary. Like it's always after the fact. It was worth it. I got to see my journey and my mind from a whole new perspective, getting input someone else who's asking questions about it kind of keeps me on edge to where
Mm-hmm.
I I revisit some areas of my journey and have that appreciation for it. And that's been good. In Utah, right now, part of my first manic episode was kind of delving into entrepreneurial thinking, which I hadn't really done prior to that.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of transitioned my career as a medical profession to entrepreneurial. And then I really contemplated, can I combine the two? Can I do an entrepreneurial medical career? And, I'm just really just trying to stay open minded that the opportunities that present themselves, will I be ready for something that appears? And so right
Mm-hmm.
now, I'm working at an e-commerce company, and I'm spending a good amount of my time networking with other founders, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
and just trying to trying to stay relevant with the community around me, and see if at one point, if there's a nice fit to where I can, have another gig, another opportunity come up, which I don't see one right now, but in the next year or two, I want to be open to that.
Yeah. I mean, the mental health space is wide open for creative entrepreneurs. And I don't mean that from a profit motive. I mean that from an opportunity motive, that there's
Yeah.
a gap there, a massive void in what's being done to help those with mental illness, mental wellness challenges. Um, Obviously, treatment is very important as well, but we want to get ahead of that. I mean, I think as an advocate, once you have a prescription to somebody to fix a problem, it's too late for a lot of people. And then you just end up being a fire chief your whole life, putting out fires just constantly. And that seems to be an ongoing fight. So if we can get that Generation Z, is kind of where the sweet spot is. The statistics show that well, 50% of all mental illness uh, is begun or started by the age of 14. So half of all the mental illness that we have just in this country, you began at the age of 14. So what age is the age we want to focus on? Probably between 14 and 18. And 14 may be too late. Um, but if we can get kids to be able to self assess, that's huge, to
Mm.
be autonomous in their decision making. So they're not being told by a doctor or told by their parents or told by somebody that here's what you have wrong and here's how you fix the problem. But if we take a more holistic approach and get into these minds before they have the problem, or as a friend of mine says, prehabituation versus rehabituation. Um, I think that's how we move this needle. I just to get a 45-year-old housewife to stop drinking wine every night isn't going to change the narrative. It may save that person's life and improve the family dynamics in that family, but it's not going to change the narrative. When I was doing the tour this summer, Brandon, when I came out to Utah and saw you guys, or I guess you came to us too. I was quoting early in my talk that 800 Americans die by suicide, alcohol, and overdose a day.
Mm.
800, okay? I just got the updated numbers. A friend of mine said, "Hey, Jeff, you need to change that." I said, "Oh, what, did they go down? Is it 750 a day now?" No, it's 822 a day. So from 800 this summer, just when I saw you in August, and now it's almost at the turn of the year. We're almost at the beginning of 2023. By the time people see this, it will be 2023. We've gone from 800 to 822, man. And there's more awareness on this stuff. I mean, fentanyl is a household word now. You used to have to spell check fentanyl. Now everybody knows how to spell it. It's like, but more people are dying. We talk about suicide more than ever before, and we see people dying more than ever before. But nothing's getting better. That's my fear. That's what makes me pause and hesitate. Am I doing any good? because I would like to see at some point the numbers start to change. Now, I know the overdose numbers, there's some new statistics coming in that they seem to little plateaued in certain areas of the country or certain statistics, but it's like we really have to nitpick. We really got to find certain statistics to show that they're getting better, because randomly just picking statistics, you've got a 95% chance that it's worse than it was 5 or 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So where's your optimism? Where's your optimism? What makes you think that we can get out of this in time?
Man, so the so how did Hitler convince, millions of people to do so wrong?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it comes down to what's called the law of suggestion. He basically continually gave narratives as to why people were bad, and
Right.
why generalizing why people were bad. And
It's
this,
brainwashing over time, right? Yeah.
yeah, it's what's written on people's subconscious is that they get their prejudices, um, and their prejudices come into effect. They hate these people, and they don't have a premise as to why they hate people. It's been they've been brainwashed into having those prejudices, um, and so we got to do the inverse. We've got to rewrite what's on people's subconscious. We've got to, you know, society and adversarially, there's a notion as to, like, we were all born into an imperfect world, and there's there's been an influx of not so good influences, such as drugs and you know
Mm-hmm.
people in their parent and in their roles as families. I think the role of family has decreased,
Oh,
um,
100%. I think that's
and
a big part of it. Yep.
and we've got to inverse that. We've got to strengthen the family unit, and give stronger hope and courage in that relationship and that trust. We've got to rebuild trust in family units, and
Mm-hmm.
um, and go through rewriting what's on our own subconscious first. For example, meditation is a great method to persuade yourself that you are okay, that you
Mm-hmm.
are safe. Uh, to get the fundamentals, because if we're not fundamentally safe and secure, then that actually allows for the fight or flight response to be more active. Uh, Meditation is a great way to um, partially intervene and get at the root of putting safety on your subconscious. Um, and
We like to think we have more control than we actually do. And but we also have a lot more control than we think we do as well. So if we can spend time, I think James Clear talks about this in Atomic Habits, we're focused on the things that we can control. So today, I can control what goes in my mouth. So my diet all day, I can control sugar intake, calories, fat, all that stuff. I can control that. I can control if I exercise or not. I'm in a position, I'm not in a wheelchair, I don't have COVID. I can exercise. I can control that. But I can't control if there's a meteor hurling at the earth, or I can't control if Trump wins the election. I can't control if Russia bombs Ukraine today. I can't control if my granddaughter gets COVID. There's things I can't control, but I think we as humans are predisposed or predetermined to somehow get hung up on the things that we can't control. And they become so polarizing. What meditation's done for me, Brandon, is in a way, especially when I do a guided meditation, but when the individual's voice says, be attentive to your sounds around you. And then when I close my eye, when I'm in meditation and I'm listening to every sound, like I can almost hear the trees growing. I can hear, you just hear you're so sensitive on the sounds. You realize real quickly, Brandon, how insignificant you really are. That overwhelming feeling that I'm not really that important. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean that in a way that everything doesn't revolve around me. I'm not the center of attention. And that's what I think we are. I think a lot of us think we are the most important person on the planet. And that sense of arrogance, that sense of narcissism is toxic. And meditation's got me to be extremely, I think I'm humble. I think I have some humility. But I have to say, out of all the things I did for my life, meditation probably the one thing I can't do without.
Yeah, I have a buddy who's starting a meditation app that basically you earn cryptocurrency for meditating.
Not the
So
best time, not the best time to come out with that. Although the price of
yeah,
crypto is way down, you can get a lot more crypto now you could have a year ago.
yeah, yeah. So it's interesting. It's incentivized. So you meditate, then you get crypto. It's
Yeah, the hesitation I would have with that would be that meditations, the app I had, I use Sam Harris's Waking Up app. That's the app I use. And he used to have a streak thing where you would keep track of your days of meditation. There's like a reward structure. You got 20 days, 50 days, 60 days. The problem was that people then would just, if I couldn't meditate, they would just turn the app on, let it run. So they get the credit for the day. So he took the streaks off. You can't reward something that,
doing.
you know what I'm saying? I mean, so I understand your friend's got an app and that I hope it works well for him. I'm all for that. But I would think for me, that would be kind of counter to meditation, having a reward structure. But I think for kids, that may work well, to have kids have some incentive to meditate. So once they can try it for a while, then they can decide on their own if it works. And some people just aren't ready for it, Brandon. Some people just aren't open for it. I've
Mhm.
got people telling me, "Oh, I can't. There's no way I can meditate." Like, how the hell do you know? If you don't think you can, then certainly you can't. But if you could try and just have an open mind, I think you'd be really surprised how not difficult it is to be aware of your thoughts and not identify with them. It's not that hard. And this is coming from someone with attention deficit. And when people hear I meditate, they're just shocked. They're like, "No way, Jeff, you can't meditate," you know. But it's so helpful, and it's kind of a lost art. Well, let me do this. Let's wrap this up. It's been a fast 50 something minutes, man. Um, really enjoy your candor. Really enjoy your authenticity. Really enjoy um, your perspective on a few things. And I really admire the courage for you to talk about your brain injury, talk about your challenges that you have in a real public setting on LinkedIn primarily. Even the pictures that you share with your TMS helmet on and thumbs up and you're smiling. It's like that gives people permission to explore these options in a non-clinical way,
Mhm.
instead of being told to go see somebody, here's a helmet, this will fix you. You're kind of embracing these things as opportunities to make yourself better, which, in and of itself, that's probably the only way to look at therapy is embrace it and not look at it as you're being told to do something.
Thank you. Yeah,
How can people reach you? What's the easiest way to reach out to you?
LinkedIn is probably the primary way. Um, I'm fairly active there.
Well, listen, I really appreciate your friendship. Appreciate you coming on the show, and I'm excited to see what the future holds for you next year. And I'm sure our paths will cross many times. I've got so many initiatives going right now. I need to kind of make sure I don't have too many initiatives going on. It's easy to,
Take care of yourself, man.
yeah, I know. I got people checking in on me. Even I got 2 texts this morning from advocates off of LinkedIn that just, hey Jeff, have a good. Make sure you shut everything off over the holidays. And enjoy your family. And I'm like, I'm getting better at it. So, well, listen, man, I love you like a brother. Appreciate what you're doing and keep living undeterred. Okay.